Hi, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that everyone can hear me very clearly. So, besides that, we have a little bit uh, sound problem at the moment. So, thank you for coming and attending virtually to this sharing moment session with myself. So, before I begin, so allow me to introduce myself. My name is Farid Mohammad Hassan. So I am currently a senior lecturer at the Faculty of Sharia and Law, University Science Islam Malaysia in Nilai. So I would like, first of all, I would like to thank to Proofreaders United for inviting me to share my experience uh, on how I did my PhD previously, right? So a little bit background of myself. So I graduated from my bachelor degree in 2011 in Bachelor of Sharia and Law. I did both civil law and Sharia law, and I graduated from the Faculty of Sharia and Law, University Science Islam Malaysia, in 2011. After that, I received a scholarship from the same university where I did my first degree. Right? University Science Islam Malaysia offered me a scholarship to do both my master's degree and my PhD for 5 years. Right. So basically, the contract was I have to finish my master's and my PhD within 5 years' time. So at first, I was reluctant to accept because taking into consideration the timeline that especially the PhD journey, because at that time I have heard so many stories, so many experience from my friends, and I have read online that a number of people or number of the PhD students couldn't finish their thesis, their PhD within 4 to 5 years. So at first I was reluctant to accept the offer for the scholarship. But then I took some moments and give myself a chance. So I challenged myself that why not? This is the opportunity, right? That one is probably thinking of or seeking for or applying for a scholarship. So then I accepted that scholarship. So I went to Ahmad Ibrahim Kuliah of Laws in IIU, International Islamic University, Malaysia, and I did my master's degree in Masters of Comparative Law. I finished within 1 year. So I got my PhD, master's in 2013. So for I got my master's first class honor for my master's, and then I went to University of Aberdeen for my PhD. I will go back to how did I apply for my PhD candidacy at the university, and prior to that, and the journey in between, the viva at the end, and post PhD, right? But briefly on that particular on my academic journey. So I went to University of Aberdeen on January 2014. So I began my PhD journey since 2014. So I submitted my PhD on January 2018. So it was 4 years of time, right? So and then I was supposed to sit for my viva 2 months after that, which was supposed to be on March, because I submitted my thesis on January. So I was supposed to sit for my viva on March, but since there was a weather issue in the UK at that time, Then the viva was postponed until May, right? So my viva took place on 9th of May 2018. So the same date that Malaysia had its 13th general election at that time. So most of you were having a general election in Malaysia. So while I myself, struggling, fighting my last journey for my PhD at that time, right? And then I passed my viva thereafter. So uh, since the advertisement on this sharing moment has been shared in a number of groups in Facebook, such as in doctorate support group and also in Tulis Thesis Facebook. So I received almost 120 questions from all of you, the viewers tonight, and also those who cannot attend the live session now, but they have sent me a number of questions. So I will try my best to address all these questions uh, to the best of my ability, right? So basically, I have divided my presentation or my sharing moment into 6 parts. First, I will talk about the pre-PhD candidacy. So, uh, what happened before I went to the UK, and then I will turn to the second part of my sharing moment on the proposal, right? And then the third part, I will discuss on what happened throughout the writing period, right? And then thereafter, the fourth part, I will discuss and share with you on the draft chapters and also the draft thesis. So the fifth part, I will explain on the editing part and also the proofreading part, because many of you asked me the same questions whether I did send my thesis for proofreading. So the answer is yes, but I will explain to you how many times did I send my thesis for proofreading, and lastly the viva. So a number of you also have asked me the same questions on how did I prepare for my viva, what were the questions being asked by the examiners during my viva session. So how did I handle the questions from the examiners and so on. So I will deal with these questions in turn. So with regards to the first part of my sharing moment, that is the pre-candidacy period. So basically, some of you have asked me how did I decide my supervisor or my university. So basically, I prepared a proposal, all right, to apply to a number of universities. Most of the application were made to the UK universities, Australian universities, and also European universities. I also sent one or two applications to New Zealand universities, Waikato and the other university. I forgot the name of the university, but more or less that I sent like more than 20 to 30 applications for my PhD candidacy. Whether my potential supervisors would accept me and agree to supervise for my PhD research. So there was one professor from uh, what was the name of the university? Uh, no, the Australian universities. I forgot. Oh, Macquarie University. Thank you. Thanks to my friend. So he remind me of the name of the professor. So there was one professor from Macquarie University from Australia. So he went to National University of Singapore for a conference at National University of Singapore at that time. So I and my friend, we went to National University of Singapore to meet him personally. All right, and he it was a surprise to him that I made that commitment and to go to Singapore to meet him personally. So we had a number. We discussed on my proposal, and he agreed to supervise my PhD research. But however, after considering a number of considerations and circumstances, because in Australia, I think that there was only two professors at that time who are experts in that particular area of law that I wanted to do my PhD at that time. One is at the University of Macquarie, that the professor that I went to see him in Singapore, and the other one is at Sydney University. So at that time, I also applied for my PhD candidacy at Sydney University. However, after receiving a reply from that professor from the University of Sydney, so uh, I would like to share this with all of you. That some of you have asked me whether, I have received some harsh comments from my supervisor or harsh comments from a professor for that instance. So that particular professor from Sydney University told me after he received my PhD proposal that he told me that please check your in please triple check your English, right? So when I read the comment, so of course I felt down, and I felt humiliated sometimes. So of course people will, I'm a mortal, yeah, I'm a human being. So of course that reading that comment from a professor that I intend to further my studies. So of course that uh, uh, I take I take his opinion that perhaps that he is not the right supervisor for me, and then I receive a reply from a number of universities in the UK, and also one university in from Copenhagen, Denmark, right? So Copenhagen University accepted my application, and also University of Aberdeen, and also University of Glasgow at that time in Scotland. Both are in Scotland. So I decided to go to the University of Aberdeen at that time because the reason why I chose University of Aberdeen is because uh, at least more than two professors in the Faculty of Law at that time have the same area of expertise. So I was thinking at that time that if something bad to happen to my supervisor, then I will have backup at the time. So at least I can change my supervisor, and there will be other professor that could replace my supervisor if anything to happen to him, right? So, but of course, something could also happen to me. But I wasn't thinking at that time about myself, but I was thinking about what would happen to my supervisor. So I went to the University of Aberdeen at that time, right? And then now, with regards to proposal, now I prepared a proposal, uh, and I intend to write on the issue of signing or ratifying an international treaty by Malaysia, only by Malaysia at that time. That was my uh, uh, initial intention, right? So that was my proposal. So I sent my proposal to the professor at the School of Law, University of Aberdeen. So he accepted me at that time. But when I started my PhD, when I enrolled my PhD candidacy at the university, so when I meet my supervisor at that time, so he told me that I must change my proposal. So he was of the opinion that I cannot sustain and survive for my PhD journey if I only were to write on Malaysia per se. So he asked me to extend my area of research not only to cater the issue of Malaysia only, but also to expand it to Southeast Asian countries. So at that time, I was shocked because of course, I was thinking that once you have accepted my proposal, then that proposal will be the title or the topic that I will be writing throughout my PhD journey. But it didn't turn out with what I have expected, right? So then I was struggling at first because knowing the legal systems in Southeast Asia, the language, right, and also the type of government, the type of government in these countries. So of course, it gives me difficulties in terms of finding sources, right, especially legal sources, because for example, that I had difficulties in finding cases because for legal writing, I have to support my writing based on not only statutes or legislations or laws from these countries, but I also have to refer to a number of decided cases by domestic courts of these countries. So the problem was that the national courts of Southeast Asian countries, especially in Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, Myanmar. So the national courts of these countries, they wrote the judgment and also the legislations of their countries were all in their mother tongue, right? In their native language, right? So in Khmer, right? In Lao language and so on. So uh, then when I told my supervisor that I cannot find um, uh, uh, literatures, especially the cases, all right, I cannot find any authorities to support my writing, especially the cases and also legislations in English, because all the sources were written in their respective mother tongue. But my supervisor just told me that find it. I don't care, just find it. So I was thinking that that's gonna be the end of my journey because, of course, I tried to find those sources for at least 2 weeks. I couldn't find. So when I went to see my supervisor after having that difficulties, that he just told me that there will be, right. Definitely there will be the literatures and the sources that I'm trying to find, right. So then I did the research after 2 weeks of time that I have spent, which I couldn't find it, but at the end I managed to find and secure those sources basically. So you have to know where to find it and how to find it by using certain keywords, for instance. So for to find these sources, for instance, that I think that I need another occasion to at least share the tips or how to find sources, especially legal sources, not in English right now. Having finished with the first part of my presentation on pre-PhD candidacy, then we go to the second part of my presentation or my sharing moment on the proposal, right? Now, some of you have told me, have asked me that why did I choose that topic? So how did I choose the topic and the reason behind it? So basically, before I went to University of Aberdeen for my PhD, I presented a paper, right, on the same topic that I did my PhD at an international conference held in University of Malaya in 2013 at that time. So after that, I received comments from a number of professors who attended that particular conference. So they gave me, inputs, right, and opinions on how I could improve my paper, especially the research that I will be conducting thereafter, right? So from there, I developed my proposal and then present it in the way of a proposal, a PhD proposal, and send it to my potential supervisors. So some of you also ask me, how did I find my supervisor? So how did I choose my supervisor? Now, basically, that I opened up the websites, the university websites. Then I go to the faculty or the school that I wanted to do my PhD. And of course, that I went to law school websites, and then I find the professor's expertise, right? Then I find that the email, and then I copy the email and send I mean the email address and send my proposal to them, right? So of course that you have to wait for at least 1 or 2 weeks for them to reply at least, because being a professor, right? Sometimes that of course they will be busy, right? Then they have to take some time to read your proposal, and then give their comments, and then reply to you whether they have the time, or they have they still have uh, the number of students that are to be their possible PhD candidates to be supervised at that time. So I received a number of rejections. Of course, that I think that I sent like more than 30 applications. So I received more than 20 rejections. Of course, that they said that I couldn't finish my PhD on that particular area. So they have already a number of PhD students under their supervision, so they couldn't add another student. So that is why when I received a reply from my supervisor at that time, then I think that this is the place that could be the place that I can develop my research skill, and also I could do my PhD uh, at the faculty. When I enroll for my PhD, now this is the third part of my sharing moments. When I started to enroll, right, the first 3 weeks, right, because I went there on January, right? So of course that they had Christmas and New Year holiday. So after 3 weeks, then the semester opened at that time. So I met my supervisor for the first time. So we had a chit chat and getting to know each other. So he told me that he will be handling two classes, because he will be teaching two courses for master's level. So he asked me to assist him to handle some of the lectures and also discussions for these two courses. So being a good PhD student under his supervision, of course, I would have said yes to my supervisor. So I help him, right, to handle some of the lectures and some of the classes for master's level at the time. So of course that being students for master's level at a European country, of course that the students will come from various backgrounds. So most of them were practitioners, right? Legal practitioners, judges, right? Legal advisors, and so on, right? So they have, so many experience, right, in their respective countries. So, of course, they ask me so many questions. So at that time, my supervisor, you know, uh, 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 you know, think that he had this thinking that whether I could handle all these questions, because if I cannot survive or handle the questions from the master's classes, how could I survive for my viva, all right, later on. So I managed to answer the questions during the classes and so on, and then thereafter my supervisor asked me to meet him at his office, and told me that I could have started my writing thereafter, right? So after a few months, right? So my supervisor, asked me to meet him for consultation. So when he asked me a number of questions with regards to my topic, or my area of research, right, the thing that I wrote for my chapter. So he asked me so many questions. And of course, I couldn't answer most of the questions because that was the early part or the early period of my PhD journey. So, I couldn't read as many books or journal articles as I could because I just started my journey. But in his mind, that I should have prepared with so many things. In his mind also that I should have read most of the literatures, right, in the latest literatures from journal articles and also from books, right. So I still remember very vividly that he asked me this one question with regards to a legal principle. So I couldn't answer him, but I attempted to answer his question, but I answered him wrongly. So he told me on my face at that time that, and I quote, or I still remember his words very vividly, that he told me that I think undergraduate students understand the principles more than you do. So at that time, when I heard that kind of comment, so I was thinking, how could my supervisor compare myself to undergraduate students? So well, I couldn't take it at first. But when I went back to my office and also I went back home at that time, so I was thinking perhaps that, he didn't mean it, right? Perhaps that I need a good wake up call. So I need someone to give me a big slap on my face so that I could wake up and realize that, I have to do this correctly. This is a serious business, so I cannot, or take this for granted. So I have to do more, right, for my research. And then I started to, push myself, right, reading so many materials, all right, and then every 2 weeks we had a discussion or a meeting, right. So I went to see my supervisor every 2 weeks. So every 2 weeks, then I will prepare a draft of my chapter and then email him. I mean, both of my supervisors email them, and then they will take like 2 to 3 days to read my draft, and then they will ask me to see them at my main supervisor's office. So three of us, will sit together and discuss the draft that I have prepared. So being a very strict supervisor at that time, my main supervisor, right? So whenever he asked me questions, right? For example, which page of the judgment did I, did I take from, right? And then which paragraph, right? So he was so detailed, right, at that time. So when I told him that, I took it from this page and this paragraph, he will open up, he will start googling whether the answer that I gave was correct or not. So he did that for 2 years, right? So I don't think that he has this trust issue with me, but I think that he wanted to ensure whether what I have cited in my draft, in my chapter, in my thesis, the sources and also the citations are all correct, right? So he did that for 2 years. So thank God, all right. So I survived the first 2 years because all citations that I gave in my draft, right. So he checked, and then it turns out to be correct citations, right. And then all the discussions, every 2 weeks discussions, they were all like we were having a viva session. Both of my supervisors, they will ask me so many questions with regards to what I have prepared in the draft. They will ask me why, when, how, all the WH questions, right? Then I have to answer all their questions. So sometimes when they ask me a number of questions, for example, what do you mean by this paragraph, or what do you mean by this line? What do you mean by this sentence, for example? So I have to explain to them. So sometimes they told me that, I think that what you explain to us is easier to be understood rather than what you have put it in writing. So I have to reword whatever I have prepared in my draft chapters, for example. So from there, I started to, try to say something. Well, I try to speak, right, or explain verbally, and then I put it in writing, right? So perhaps that when you speak or when you say it, right, verbally or orally, then those words will be clearer than or as compared to what you put them on, or how do you put them in writing, right? So I did that, right? So I think that it works for me. So because whenever I send my drafts or my draft chapters, for instance, to my supervisors, then they started to like it, right, rather than what I have prepared before, right? Now, uh, the next question that uh, now, how do you overcome they build from your supervisor. So how do you overcome the comments, right, from your supervisors and so on? So as I explained to you earlier, that of course, that sometimes I receive harsh comments from my supervisors, right? Both in writing, right? So because they give comments in writing from my draft chapters, right? And also they will say to my face whenever we had the discussion every 2 weeks, right? So they will, prepare comments verbally and in writing, right? So, being a student or being a PhD candidate at that time, of course, that I have to listen to my supervisor because I am still in the process of learning, right? So I will take whatever my supervisors comments and apply and put it in writing, right? So because, uh, but I had also some problems because sometimes when my supervisors told me to do A, for example, I did that. So when I reword or redo my draft chapter and send it to my supervisors, then they will say, something else, right? So when I explain to them that, you told me to do this, so I did that, right? So now you are telling me that, it should be the other way around, right? So sometimes they just say that just forget about whatever we have told you before, then just do what we are commenting now, right? So I always follow my supervisor's advice, right? So just follow because I have this one professor from University Technology Mara, Professor Dato Dr. Rahmat Muhammad. So he always tell me that just do whatever your supervisor asks you to do, right? So just listen to them, listen to or heed to their comments and advice. So that's what I did during my PhD, right? Now, um, some of you have asked me some tips on how did I, write my thesis or prepare my thesis. Now, I have a number of uh, tips. This is not a tips because I cannot impose something uh, on everyone, right? Like, I cannot say that this is the right way to do it because sometimes it will suit you or it suits you, but sometimes it doesn't, right? So it depends on individual because different researcher, right, different individual will be conducting different research, right, different areas of studies, right? Perhaps some of you are doing sciences, some of you are doing social sciences, or some of you perhaps are doing multidisciplinary areas of studies, right? So with regards to my own experience, so this is what I did. Now, you know what exactly that you about to write or what you will be writing, the topics, the subtopics, and so on. So everything will be in your mind. Chapter one, what we will be writing. Chapter two, what will be the contents. Chapter three, four, and five, and so on. right? So you know the chapterization of your thesis, at least the skeleton of your PhD thesis, right? So what I did was, now I download and find materials or all materials relating to the topic that I am writing, right? Firstly, what I did was I find literatures, books and journal articles online, right, in PDF online, right, by using specific keywords. For example, if you are writing on um, paddy field or gas emissions, something like that. All right. So with as far as my research is concerned, that I'm writing something on the issue of immunity of head of state. So I will start finding literatures, all right, materials which are of relevance to my area of research. So I will use the keywords, right? The important words or keywords for my research and start Googling it, right? I always use Google Scholar, right, at first, right? From there, because in Google Scholar you can set the year, which year that you are trying to look at, right? The literature is available, right? With regards to that particular area. So let's say that the 5 years, right? The previous 5 years literature is available. So I started to find them and download them, right? In PDF, right? So if I couldn't download them from Google Scholar, then I will use online databases that the university subscribed to, right? I use Hein Online, right, Westlaw, and so on. So there are many online databases available. So it depends on the university that you are doing your PhD. So some of the universities didn't subscribe to a number of online databases, but some of them subscribe to the other online databases. So I cannot say that use this database to find your literatures. So it depends on areas of law that you are areas of studies that you are doing, right? So when you download all these materials, right, journal articles or ebook, right, not only you have to download them, or not only I download them, right, I downloaded them. So I rename all these materials, right? So I will rename the PDF file, right, according to the name and also the title, right? So the reason why I did that, because it will be easier for me to find those sources thereafter. So whenever I would like to go and find and read that particular literature, then I know where to find it, right? If I couldn't find it in my laptop, then I can at least use the search engine in my laptop, so that it could find where yeah, the literatures are located, right? So when I have downloaded them and renamed them, and then I will start to sort them according to the theme, according to the title, right? So I will put so many folders in my own laptop, right? So basically, what I did was I have my own database. So I download them from online databases and save them in my own laptop at that time. So I use a Dropbox at that time, right? So that I will, I can have access to all these materials whenever I go, right? So I have more than 100 folders. It depends on the topic. That let's say 10 articles on topic A, then all these literatures, books and journal articles will be put in that particular folder, right? If there are subfolders, then all of them will be put in these subfolders, right? So it will be easier for you to find all these literatures or all these materials after that, right? So not only my materials, I keep it using a Dropbox or Google Drive at a time. it also I also put or save my uh, uh, draft chapters in Dropbox as well, because I had this experience whereby um, uh, there was a problem with my laptop at that time. I think that when I was in year three at that time, so I have six chapters in my previous laptop, my old laptop. So I couldn't switch on my laptop at that time because there was problem with the motherboard or something. I forgot because I'm not an expert in computer, but there was a problem with my laptop at the time. So I couldn't retrieve my documents. I had backups in my pen drive, but it was a few months back. So there were so many changes that I have made to the draft. So I couldn't, locate the latest chapters of my thesis at that time. So I had this problem. So I went to see my supervisor and tell him what happened, right? So he told me that there was not his problem because I should have foreseen that. I should have, you know, foresee that I might be having that particular problem, right? Because with electronics devices, something bad could happen, right? So I need to have backups, right? So he doesn't care, right? What I'm having at that moment. What he wants is that he wants my chapter to be submitted to him on time, right? So then, I seek help from a number of friends, number of Malaysian friends who did their PhD in computer science at that time to retrieve my documents. And thank God, I could retrieve the documents back and, submitted my draft chapters to my supervisors on time, right? So please learn take this lesson, right? So whenever you are writing, right, do not save it in your laptop without having it back up in for example, or online folders, for example Google Drive or Dropbox or clouds, for example, so that anything happen, then you can still retrieve those documents by using other computers, for example. But whenever you're writing, right, let's say that you are drafting your thesis, for example, so make sure that whenever you write something, then straight away save it, right? So that anything happen to your computer, then whatever you have written, right, whatever you have updated in your draft will be updated as well online. So your draft online can still be retrieved without having been missed with the updates that you have done so far, right? Now, the writing. Now, some of you have asked me the tips on how to write because some of you are having difficulties in writing. How did I improve my writing skills? How did I polish my writing skills? How did I manage my or focus on my writing? Now, I think that I just do it, right? So because whenever your supervisors, whenever my supervisors gave me comments, so I will straight away make amend to my draft chapters, right? To be in line with whatever the comments given, right? And then, as I told you earlier, that uh, uh, I have done my draft chapter, I mean draft thesis um, when I was in my fifth semester at that time, right? So I had my first draft of my thesis. But unfortunately, what happened to me was, despite having a problem with my laptop, right, previously, there was a change, right, in the literature, right, especially in my research, whereby uh, uh, the international court, because I'm dealing with international law at the time, so the international court had has decided a new case with a new judgment, which was contrary to whatever I have prepared in my draft chapters, Right. So when I went to see my supervisors, then they told me that I have to change at least 3 chapters of my thesis to make my thesis in accordance with the latest development, right, in that particular area of law. So at that time, when I was in my 5th semester, towards my 6th semester, I was thinking that I could graduate on time, right? But because of these changes, then I couldn't do that, right? So I have to make amend to the chapters, especially the draft thesis, so that my thesis will be up to date, right, with the latest development, right? So I still remember what my supervisor taught me very vividly with regards to submission of my thesis for oral examination for viva. That if let's say that I am about to, I will be submitting my thesis tomorrow, if there is any latest development on the area of what I have written in my thesis, then I have to make amend on it, right? So that is why the longer you take your time to finish your thesis, if something happened to the area of your research, there were changes, right? Perhaps that there were new methodology, for example, there were recent research made you know um, uh, to be in contravene or not to be in line with whatever you have prepared, then you will be having all these problems, right? Because you have to make amend all this, because if you didn't, or if you do not make amend, right, or change your thesis, or reconstruct your thesis to be in line with the latest development, then your thesis will not be up to date and in line with the recent development. What more if it is to the contrary with the recent development, right? Now, some of you also ask me on my time management, right? How long that I spent to write my thesis, right? And at what time? Right? I have to be honest with you that it depends on individual. Um, for as far as I am concerned, I am not a morning person, so I cannot work in the morning, because I tried that before. So I went to my office in the morning, right? Having I had my breakfast and so on. I had my coffee, before I started my routine, right? So I couldn't do that because I feel sleepy in the morning. So I changed my routine, right? So I started writing or drafting my thesis after afternoon, right? So normally I will go to the library, right, or to my office after 2 p.m., right, at that time. So because when I go to the library, because I spend most of my time in the library, because at the university, especially my university, the library is 24 hours. Um, I live near a medical school, right? My apartment is close to medical school, right? But my office, because all PhD students, we will be given an office at that time. So my office is, quite far from my place. So I chose to go to the medical school library instead of going to my office. So I went to the medical school library at 2 or 3 p.m. So at that time, the undergraduate students will just finish the lectures or tutorials at that time. So they will start to go to the gym, right? And then they will go back after that, right? Then, I will be left alone at the library. So, uh, you know, um, by having the library, especially for myself, then I will have a very quiet environment. So at that time, I could focus on my writing, right? So I have access to the library because I have this student ID, so I could have access to the library 24/7, right? So I went to the library at 2 or 3 p.m. and then I went back to my home at 6 a.m. in the morning. So I think that you could do the calculations from 2 or 3 p.m. until 6 a.m. in the morning. So I prepared and bring my dinner box, right? So I had my lunch at home, and then I prepare my dinner box and also my supper box, and then bring it to with me, bring them to with me to the library, and I will go to the pantry to reheat the foods that I prepared, and I had my dinner and my supper, right? And then I continue, right? And I always have my coffee, so coffee will be my best friend, right? Or coffee, was and still my best friend because I couldn't live without coffee, right? So I can say that I'm a coffee addict, but not as many cups as I had before, right? So time management again, you know, you have to decide because I cannot impose anything. For example, that you have to do, in the afternoon or in the evening. So I cannot say that to you. Why? Because you have to remember that some of you, not only single, but some of you, are having a family, right? So you have to take care of your husband or your wife, and then you have kids to be taken care of. Some of you are taking care of your parents, right? Your mother or your father or your other beloved one, right? You are taking care of your other siblings, for example. If they are sick, no one else is going to take care of him or her. Then you have that kind of responsibility. So all this, it depends on you, right? So you yourself know what time that you will have a free time for yourself in order for you to concentrate on your writing, right? So how long that you should spend on writing and so on still depends on you because some of you not only a full-time student, but some of you are also a part-time PhD student, for example. So you have to work in the morning from 8 to 5, for example. Then after that, you have to go and fetch your kids, fetch your husband, fetch your wife, and then take care of your parents and so on, right? So you know, you know. Your body need rest sometimes, so it depends on you whether you could spend at least 2 or 3 hours for yourself in order to spend your time to finish your writing and so on, right? But I myself personally, so I spend more than 12 hours a day, right? So some of you also ask me questions whether I took some time for myself. The answer is yes, right? I spent 6 days for my research, and I took one day off, right? From Monday to Saturday afternoon, right? Or Saturday after 6 p.m. And I will spend my time for my thesis, right? After that, I will go to Tesco because I had this small grocery shops at the back of my flat at the time. I will spend my time to go, you know, shopping, right? Buy my groceries, right? And do some shoppings. Then I went back and then I will cook and I will do my laundries and so on. So on Saturday, I normally spend my time watching movies, right? So because your mind and your eyes will be tired because you will be focusing on your screen, your laptop, right, your PC. Then you have to read many literatures from journal articles and from books online, right? So then you need your mind and your eyes to rest, right? So I spend my time watching movies, right? So I spend my time to watch just for laughs, right? So that I could have some laugh, right? Some laughing, because I need to re-energize myself so that the next day then I will have this strength for me to refocus on my writing and my research after that, right? Now, some of you also have asked me, did I use any softwares while writing? The answer is yes. I started to use the EndNote, right? The software EndNote. But when I wrote my when I write my third chapter, right? Because for law thesis, so I have to have a number of footnotes as my authorities, right? So the software, the EndNote software, cannot you know um, uh, process all these references. Then I change it to Mendeley. So until now, I still use Mendeley. So other than Mendeley, I use MindJet, the software called MindJet, right? Mind and Jet, right? So it's one word, MindJet. So the university subscribed to this software, so it helps me in terms of how will on how um, will I write down and brainstorm myself, and then I will puzzle up all my thoughts, right? When I write it down in the software, and then mix and match all these opinions and ideas, and then I will write them down in writing, right? In my chapters, right? So the answer to the question whether did I use any softwares, then the answer is yes. I use Mendeley and also MindJet, right? Because for law, personally didn't use any other softwares, like how to process the data, SPSS, and so on. So I didn't use any of those softwares, right? Now, draft chapters and thesis. Now, some of you have asked me how many drafts that I prepared or have I prepared for my thesis. I have prepared for one chapter, I think that more than 7 drafts, right? One chapter, a number of drafts. Another chapter, a number of drafts, right? Why? Because you must polish your thesis. So, because for my supervisor, I cannot start writing the next chapter until and unless the chapter that I am writing at that moment, is presentable, right? So it is polished, right? So that is why I had, I have a number of drafts for every chapters, right? So when you combine, all right, for myself, that when I combine all these chapters together, then I will see that there are loopholes or lacuna, right, in my writing, redundancy here and there, right? Sometimes I already explained it in that chapter, and then I re-explain it again. So then I have to remove any of that, right? Then the word counts will be lesser, right? After that. So that is why you need to draft your chapters and thesis as many drafts as possible, because you cannot simply draft. For myself, I've been told by my supervisor that I cannot just simply prepare only one draft for every chapter or for my whole thesis. Why? Because the thesis must be presentable for oral examination. So all the dots, the commas, the references, the paragraphs, the sentences, the words, the choice of words, right? The um, you know the choice of words, and also the arguments that you use, right, in your draft thesis must be well presented, right? So the right choice of words must be used in order to explain your position in your thesis, right? Now, editing and proofreading, right? I believe that it comes to an end to my discussion, but I'll try to briefly explain the remaining 2 points. Editing and proofreading, right? As I mentioned to you earlier, that I did prepare a number of drafts of my thesis, right? And then I edited my thesis by uh, printing the whole pages of my thesis, right? And I will use this, uh, a highlighter, right? Red or orange in color, right? And a long ruler, so that I could read my every line of my thesis by using the ruler, right? Then if I find mistake or typos or errors in those lines or in those paragraphs, then I will highlight it, right? and then I will check until the end, and then I will go back to the soft copy and then change it. Once I've changed it, then I will tick in the draft that I've highlighted, right? So that is why I did my editing and proofreading, right? So some of you have asked me that did I send to any proofreading, right? For proofreading, right? I sent my thesis for proofreading for 4 times, right? 3 times before before the end draft or the last draft of my thesis. The first time of my proofreading, I sent it to a pastor, an English teacher, right? He is a native speaker, right? And then the second time, I sent it to an American. She is doing her PhD in history at the same university. The third time, I sent it to a Malaysian friend. She did her PhD in English language, right? And the last time before I submit for my viva, I sent my thesis to Elite Editing, right, which is located in Australia, right? I spent, right, so except the first three, especially for Elite Editing, which I sent for the last time, I spent for 2,300 Australian dollars, equivalent to 7,200 ringgit at that time, right? So I spent my money on proofreading. Now, I send for proofreading only on the contents. The footnotes, I myself check it, right? So the footnotes, I myself will check them. Every single lines, every single words in the footnotes. So the total word counts for my thesis was 300 less to be 100,000 words. So it was 99,909 and 700 something, right? So almost 100,000 words, right? And the viva, right? So some of you have asked me, how did I prepare for the viva, right? Whether how did I manage to answer the questions, the provocative questions from the examiners? Now, I have been reminded by my supervisors that you yourself know your thesis, right? You will know more about your thesis as compared to your examiners because you have done all the research, all the reading, all the writing by yourself for at least 3 to 4 years, right? So you know inside out of your thesis. Your examiners will sometimes question on certain part of your thesis in order to seek for clarifications from you, right? So do not be afraid of answering provocative questions. Sometimes they just, ask you questions, by, provoking you, right? So that, they could see whether you manage to, calm yourself and, answer those questions calmly or confidently, right? Tips for answering questions during Viva. Did I prepare for PowerPoints? Now, for the University of Aberdeen, so I myself I didn't prepare any PowerPoint slides, right? So my Viva was held for up to 50 minutes. So we had this, an academic discussion. So my examiners they asked me, provocative questions, but very academically, right? So they asked me my opinions whether I could apply my findings of my thesis to certain situations in a number of countries in the world, for example, whether they were testing me whether I really understand my findings, right? Whether I could utilize my findings from my thesis and then apply to a similar situation in different countries all around the world. So it is up to you whether how do you respond on those questions, because sometimes your finding cannot fit different situations. Why? Then you must justify, right? So I believe that the time is up because the time is already 10 and 4 minutes. So I'm sorry that if I couldn't answer most of your questions, right? But feel free to ask me personally by sending me your questions to my Facebook, right? Or you could write me an email, right? So who knows that we could have a chit chat or over coffee, right, in the future after this session, right? So I hope that whatever I have shared with you, my personal journey and so on, could be of assistance and could inspire you in any way, right? So that you can take any of those good points for yourself, so that you could apply them in your PhD journey, and then improve yourself if it fits your situation. So with that, I thank you, and feel free to keep in touch with me in the future. Right? Thank you so much.